My name is Eleanor Mathers, and I never thought the last gift I'd receive from my daughter-in-law would be her silence, wrapped in ink. It came 2 days after the funeral. A small cream-colored envelope tucked into the folds of a wool coat I hadn't worn since spring. I hadn't even realized I'd lent it to her. My hands trembled as I opened it, not because I knew what it would say, but because something about it felt final, intimate, like she'd reached back from the grave just to whisper a secret in my ear. The handwriting was hers, looping, delicate. A single line. He knows I know. If anything happens, ask Eleanor. That was it. No name, no explanation, no plea. Just a quiet warning written in the kind of calm terror only a woman hiding something knows how to express. And she had signed it not with love or apology, but just B. Brielle, my son's wife, my daughter-in-law for almost a decade. A woman I never fully trusted, though I never had a reason to fear her, or fear for her, until now. I sat down at the kitchen table, heart-pacing, note in hand, staring out the window like something or someone might be watching me through the curtains. The wind danced through the branches of the oak outside, casting long, crooked shadows on the wall. I hadn't cried when she died. Not really. It had been so sudden, so strange. Pneumonia, they'd said. But healthy women in their early 30s don't just fall ill and vanish. Not when they've built a life with a man like my son. Not when they still had bags unpacked in the hallway and a passport in the drawer with a flight scheduled for next week. And certainly not when they leave behind notes like this. I read it again. He knows I know. Who was he? My son. Someone else. What did she know? More importantly, why me? I wasn't close to her. Brielle had always been polite, proper, too perfect. Always with a tight-lipped smile, always with just enough warmth to make you feel bad for thinking she was hiding something. But I noticed things. I always did. Like how she would check the front door lock 3 times each night. Or how she avoided phone calls when Marcus, my son, was in the room. Or how she once asked me if I ever had doubts about the people we love. At the time, I chalked it up to marital tension. Young marriages are hard, and Marcus, well, he had a sharp tongue when things didn't go his way, but he was my son, and I had taught myself to forgive more than I questioned. But now, I couldn't unsee the hints, the tension, the way her smile rarely reached her eyes, the way she once gripped my hand tighter than necessary when we said goodbye. She's sensitive, Marcus had said, always in her head. You know how women like that can be. That phrase echoed now, women like that. And suddenly I felt the skin on my arms crawl. I stood up, grabbed the note, and walked to the den. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew where to start. The box. There had been a box. A small chest Brielle brought with her when she moved in oak, with brass corners, old and well cared for. She never let anyone touch it, said it was sentimental. After the funeral, Marcus had packed up her things in a frenzy, said he wanted the house free of reminders. I never saw the box again, but something told me he hadn't thrown it out. Marcus was emotional, yes, but not careless. Not when it came to control. He liked to know where everything was. I went to the basement. The light flickered once when I pulled the chain, casting a pale yellow wash over shelves of old linens, photo albums, and storage bins. There, behind a stack of winter blankets, just where he might have hidden something, quickly I saw it. The chest, exactly as I remembered. Small, maybe the size of a shoebox, but sturdy. My fingers traced the worn brass edge before I lifted the lid. It wasn't locked. Inside, a bundle of letters, some addressed to her, others in her handwriting, never mailed. A small brown notebook with the initials B, L, on the cover, and an envelope unsealed labeled in pencil. In case I can't say it. My breath caught. I didn't open it. Not yet. My heart pounded too loud for me to hear what it might say. Instead, I looked at the notebook. Flipping through, I saw entries, pages and pages of daily thoughts, observations, and dates. She was watching something, or someone. The first entry I read said simply, he checked the account again, same balance. But why is there always less than what he claims? The second, I heard the phone call. I wasn't supposed to. The name Eliza keeps coming up. The third, if Eleanor ever reads this, I hope she understands. I didn't know who else to trust. I stood still in the basement, surrounded by old sheets and the musty scent of forgotten things. The box in my hands felt suddenly like evidence, a weapon, or maybe a plea. Brielle had been afraid, and somehow she had trusted me more than anyone else. I held the envelope marked, "In case I can't say it," close to my chest and whispered to the air, "I'm listening now." I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the letter in the basement, not even because I feared someone might be watching me, though. As the wind scraped across the windows and the old pipes sighed in the walls, I did check the locks more than once. It was because of the look in Brielle's eyes I couldn't shake. A memory, perhaps a dream, or something in between. We were in the kitchen maybe 6 months before she died. It was one of those gray afternoons when the sky forgets what color it used to be. I had made lemon tea her favorite, though she never drank more than half a cup. She was standing near the sink, her fingers twitching at the hem of her sleeve. She asked me a question that felt out of place at the time. "Eleanor, do you think some people wear their kindness like makeup?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you think it's possible someone can be good to everyone except the person they live with?" Her voice didn't waver, but her eyes did. I remembered that clearly. The smallest tremble like a boat on invisible water. And I didn't know what to say. I changed the subject, asked her if she wanted more sugar in her tea. She smiled politely, always politely. Now, 6 months later, that question haunted me like a ghost with no name. The next morning, I sat at the table with the envelope she had left. "In case I can't say it." It felt heavier than it should, almost like it didn't want to be opened. But I opened it anyway. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper folded with precise, almost reverent care. Her handwriting was steady but smaller than usual, like she had been conserving space. Or fear. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to finish what I started. Please don't believe what they tell you about me, about how I died. I've been looking into something that doesn't add up, and I think someone close to me is hiding the truth. I can't tell if I'm paranoid or if I'm just finally seeing things clearly. But I know you've always noticed more than you say. You're quiet, observant, like me. If anything happens to me, please look in the blue book in the library, the one without a title. I've left something there. I hope it's enough. Brielle." I sat back in the chair, heart pulsing like I'd run a race. The blue book. I knew exactly which one she meant. Back when I was still working part-time at the town library, Brielle would sometimes come in and help with the reshelving. She claimed she liked the smell of old paper, said it reminded her of summers at her grandmother's house. I always assumed she was romanticizing something sad. There was one shelf tucked away in the back, the kind that no one ever noticed unless they were looking for it. On it was a book with no title, no author, no markings. It had been misprinted or mislabeled decades ago, but we never removed it. We called it the Ghost Book. Brielle once joked, "Maybe it's just waiting for someone to give it a story." Now apparently she had. I grabbed my coat and car keys. The drive to the library was short but felt unbearably long. Every red light gnawed at my nerves. I kept replaying her words in my head. "Don't believe what they tell you about me." When I arrived, the building was locked. Sunday morning. But I still had the key. No one ever asked for it back when I retired. It was just one of those details that slipped through the cracks like so much else in this town. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of dust and worn wood greeting me like an old friend. The quiet was so deep it felt like a prayer. Back to the shelf I went. Past the biographies, the gardening section, the large print novels, and then there it was, the Ghost Book, exactly where it had always been. I pulled it down, nothing on the cover, just the software of time. When I opened it, something slid out tucked between pages 74 and 75. A folded receipt. From a hardware store 2 towns over, a bag of cement mix, a lockbox, a roll of thick rope, a prepaid phone card, the date, 4 days before she died. My breath caught. Taped to the back of the receipt was a tiny USB stick. I didn't know what was on it. Not yet. But I knew one thing. Brielle had been planning something. The kind of something that either frees you or gets you killed. I stared at the tiny device in my hand and whispered, "What were you trying to tell me?" And then I heard a sound that stopped my heart. A cough, sharp, from the front of the library. I wasn't alone. I slipped the book back, shoved the USB into my pocket, and moved toward the side aisle, silent as a shadow. The cough again, closer this time. I peeked around the shelf. Marcus, my son. He was standing by the circulation desk holding a set of keys. My keys. His eyes scanned the room, and for the first time in his life, I saw something I never expected to see in his face. Not confusion, not anger, but fear. He turned and walked out without calling my name, without saying a word, which meant he wasn't here to visit me. He was checking something, or someone, and if he didn't find what he was looking for, I might not get another chance to find the truth. By the time I got back home, the USB stick felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my pocket. I didn't go straight to the kitchen. I didn't even take off my coat. I closed the door quietly behind me, checked the locks, then moved to the den where my old laptop sat unused on a side table covered in dust and memories. It took a minute to boot up, longer than I'd hoped, but eventually the screen flickered to life. I plugged in the USB with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The folder inside was simply named. For Eleanor. I clicked. There were 3 files. 1. Statement. Docs. 2. Photos. Zip. 3. Audio. Wave. I opened the document first. It was dated exactly 1 week before Brielle died. If anything happens to me, this is my side of the story. I know how this looks, Eleanor. I know I haven't always been easy to read or easy to love. I've kept secrets, but I kept them to protect myself, to protect others. I believe your son is involved in something he can't walk away from. I just don't know if he started it or got trapped in it. A few months ago, I overheard him on a call. It was late. He didn't know I was awake. He was pacing the hallway whispering. He mentioned money, offshore accounts, and a woman named Eliza. That's when I started watching. That's when I found the second phone. My chest tightened. I paused and read it again. Your son is involved. Marcus. My Marcus. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest, whose hands once reached for mine during thunderstorms. That Marcus. I kept reading. I found things in his office. Documents with fake names. Letters written in another language. I think it's Russian or Czech. I don't know. And then 2 weeks ago, he accused me of going through his things. I denied it, but he didn't believe me. That was the night he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a bruise. I took photos. I recorded audio. I made copies. I put them in the photos zip folder. I also made a call to someone I knew back in college. He's a journalist now. I didn't tell him everything, but I asked him. If a man is laundering money through a shell company, how would someone trace it? He told me where to look. That's when I realized how deep it really was. I stopped reading. I wasn't ready to see the photos. Not yet. Instead, I played the audio. The recording was scratchy, but I recognized the voices. Brielle and Marcus. I told you, stop looking through my things. I didn't touch anything, Marcus. Don't lie to me. Do you know what you're getting yourself into? No, I don't. But I know you're hiding something. And if you hurt me, I don't have to hurt you. I just have to remind you who you're married to. Click. The audio ended there. I closed the laptop. My heart was screaming, but my body stayed still. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I stood and walked to the living room, where the last family portrait still hung above the fireplace. Marcus and Brielle in the center, me beside them, smiling, pretending. I had thought she was hiding something because she was guilty. But what if she was hiding something because she was terrified? I stepped closer to the photograph. Marcus looked handsome, confident, the kind of man people trusted instantly. But his eyes were different now that I knew what to look for. There was something behind them, something cold. I had to see him that day, not to accuse him, not yet, but to watch, listen, ask the right questions. I drove to his house. He had moved back into his old bachelor flat after Brielle died. Said the big house reminded him of her. I always found that strange. He had fought to keep the house in the estate settlement. Why keep a home full of pain? When I arrived, his car was in the driveway. The front porch light was still on, even though it was midday. A small detail, but Marcus was never careless with electricity. He hated waste. I rang the bell. He opened the door within seconds, like he had been standing behind it. Mom, he said, startled. What are you doing here? I forced a smile. Thought I'd bring you that casserole I promised. He looked down. There was no casserole in my hands. I smiled wider. He stepped aside, letting me in. The place smelled like bleach. Everything was clean. Too clean. Like a showroom, not a home. There were no photos on the walls. No sign of Brielle. Not even a single keepsake. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the couch. I did. He watched me like I was a chess piece. He wasn't sure how to play. How are you holding up? I asked softly. He shrugged. Grief's a wave. Comes and goes. Any idea why she gave me her coat? He paused. A long pause. Then, I don't know. She did strange things toward the end. Like what? He hesitated. She started accusing me of things. Imagining things. I think she was having a breakdown. There it was. The lie. I nodded. Poor girl. Must have been hard feeling so alone. Marcus glanced at me then. Quick. Like a dog that suddenly hears a whistle only it can detect. What are you trying to say? He asked. I looked him dead in the eye. Nothing, darling, I said. Just remembering a time when a woman asked me if kindness could be faked. He didn't speak. Just stood still, blinking, calculating. I stood. Well, I said I should get going. As I stepped toward the door, I saw it. On his side table, a file folder. The same kind Brielle had in her handwriting notes. Labeled EM Trust. My initials. Eleanor Mathers. He followed my gaze and quickly placed a hand over the folder. I'll walk you out, he said. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't just Brielle's story anymore. He was watching me now, too. And if I wasn't careful, I might be next. The moment the door closed behind me, a chill traced my spine. Though the sun was still up and the day was warm, I didn't turn back. I walked calmly to my car, started the engine, and drove straight to the small cafe off Maple Street. It was quiet, unassuming, the kind of place no one really notices, which was exactly what I needed. I parked at the far end of the lot, pulled out my phone, and texted only 2 words to the one person I thought might still owe me a favor. You home. It had been nearly 5 years since I last saw Mara Whitaker. She used to be a police clerk, retired now, but sharp as ever. We weren't close friends, not really. But I helped her through a rough patch once, and she never forgot. Mara always said favors were like debts of the soul, quiet but permanent. 5 minutes later, her reply came. For you. Always. 20 minutes later, I was in her living room sipping bitter tea that tasted like regret and rosemary. I need to ask you something, I said. She raised an eyebrow. The kind of ask that stays here forever. I nodded. The kind with shadows attached. I handed her the USB. Can you make a copy and keep it, just in case? She didn't ask what was on it, just nodded and walked over to her desktop. Mara had always been efficient. She didn't need explanations when a person's eyes told her everything. While the files transferred, she looked at me. You're not here just to copy data. No, I admitted. I need help. Following a trail. A quiet one. She sat across from me. What kind of trail? Money, I said. Maybe something darker. My daughter-in-law left notes before she died. She thought Marcus, my son, was hiding things. Dangerous things. Mara's face didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. I continued. There's a name, Eliza. Offshore accounts. Maybe laundering? I know it sounds far-fetched, but it doesn't, she interrupted. Not anymore. She pulled out her old casebook, thick and tattered. You said offshore. You said the name Eliza. I nodded. She flipped to a tab marked Red Thread. There was a case. 2 years ago. Quiet. Swept fast. A local man used a woman's name to launder funds through fake charities. One of the accounts was flagged by an analyst in Boston, something about donations not matching receipts. Name on the account. She tapped the paper. Eliza Romanov. I felt a pulse at the base of my throat. Romanov. Not a real name, obviously, Mara said. Just one of many. But the trail disappeared. Dead end. No charges. The man cooperated and vanished. But the account name Eliza popped up again 6 months ago, tied to a house sale in town. She flipped a few pages. Guess who signed the transaction as a witness? My hands trembled as she showed me the signature. Marcus Mathers. I stared at the ink like it might turn to blood. Mara leaned in. What exactly are you planning to do, Eleanor? I'm not sure, I whispered. I don't want to believe he's capable of this. But I also don't want to end up like Brielle. Quiet. Ignored. Gone. Mara's voice softened. You won't. Not on my watch. As I left her house, the copy of the USB in my bag, I knew one thing for certain. The woman Marcus married had been smarter than anyone gave her credit for. She didn't just leave breadcrumbs, she left an entire trail. And I was going to follow it. But I had to be careful. I couldn't confront Marcus head-on, not yet. I needed more. I needed leverage. So I went back to the house. And I went into the one room I had never entered since Brielle died. Her art studio. Marcus had sealed it off, said it was too painful to go inside. But I knew where he kept the spare key. Under the loose tile near the pantry. I took it, unlocked the door. The room was untouched. Paintbrushes still in jars of dried color. An unfinished canvas on the easel, blues and grays. A woman sitting on a bench alone, her face turned away. I stepped in slowly, the air heavy with turpentine and memory. There were sketchbooks on the shelf. I flipped through one and stopped cold. One page, just one, was unlike the others. A rough pencil drawing. A man in a suit, face half obscured in shadow, standing beside a woman. Not Brielle. Someone else. Blonde. Sharp chin. Holding a briefcase. Beneath it, written in small letters. The exchange. April 19th. That was 3 days before she died. I turned the page. There in charcoal was a sketch of Marcus's office drawer. Detailed. Specific. Marked with an X on the lower right corner. She had been documenting everything. I took the book. As I locked the studio behind me, a car pulled into the driveway. Marcus? Too early. I moved fast, hid the sketchbook beneath my coat, and stepped into the kitchen like I had just returned from a walk. He entered cool and composed. Didn't know you'd be here, he said, setting down his keys. I thought I'd water the plants, I lied. Didn't want them dying. Brielle loved them. He looked at me with that half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. Right, she did. Then casually, you didn't go into her room, did you? I shook my head. No, too many memories. He watched me for a beat too long. That's wise. I smiled. You always said I was the wise one. I offered him tea, the same lemon kind Brielle used to like. He declined. He left 5 minutes later, but not before glancing just once at the door to the studio. As if he knew something might be missing. As if he was beginning to realize I wasn't just the grieving mother anymore. I was someone digging up the truth he buried, and I wasn't going to stop. That night, I sat in my bedroom with Brielle's sketchbook open on my lap, the lamplight casting long shadows across the page. The drawing of Marcus's office drawer wouldn't let me go. She had taken the time to shade the exact position of his belongings, pens, paper clips, and in the bottom right corner, a faintly drawn X. She had found something there. Or hid something. I thought of returning to his apartment, sneaking in, finding the drawer, but the risk was too high. He was already suspicious. One wrong step and I could be the next person to vanish without questions asked. No, I needed a plan. And so I turned to the one thing I'd always trusted more than my voice, my pen. I wrote Marcus a letter, not one of confrontation. No, that would only confirm what he likely suspected. Instead, I wrote with a mother's softness, a widow's grief. Dear Marcus, I've been thinking about Brielle a lot lately, about the things she never said, about the spaces between her words. I suppose I'll never know the whole truth, but I believe she was trying to protect you. That means something to me. I'm going to the cemetery tomorrow to bring flowers. Maybe you'd like to join me. Just us. A quiet moment between mother and son. Love, Mom. I folded it, placed it in an envelope, and slid it under his front door just before dawn, when the world still held its breath. And then I waited. Hours passed. No reply. But at exactly 3:04 p.m. my phone buzzed. Marcus. I'll meet you there. 5 o'clock. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill outside town, shrouded in weeping willows and the rustle of soft wind. Brielle's grave was toward the back beneath a crooked elm. The headstone was simple, understated. Brielle L. Mathers. Signed 91, 2023. Beloved wife. Artist. Dreamer. He was already there when I arrived. Standing arms crossed his silhouette motionless against the late afternoon sun. "You brought lilies," I said gently, placing the bouquet beside the headstone. "They were her favorite," he replied. Silence stretched between us, thick and brittle. I broke it. She never seemed afraid of death, but she looked afraid of something else. He didn't respond. "She used to double-check the locks," I said. "Did you know that?" His jaw tightened. "She had anxiety. She had secrets," I said quietly. "So do you?" He turned to face me, then the charm gone from his expression, replaced by something colder. "Sharper? What are you getting at, Mom?" I met his eyes. "Did you love her?" He blinked. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one." He looked back at the headstone. "She was difficult. Always imagining things. Always digging into places she didn't belong." I kept my voice steady. "She left me a note, Marcus." He froze. "She said, 'If anything happens to me, ask Eleanor.'" I let that sink in. "Why me, Marcus?" He laughed softly. Not with humor. With defense. "Because she knew how gullible you are. How you see ghosts in shadows and think you're uncovering truth. She kept records. Sketches. Audio." His face changed just for a moment. "You're lying." "I'm not." He stepped closer. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mother. And you've already finished yours?" I asked. He studied me like a puzzle he hadn't realized was missing a piece. I lowered my voice. "I'm not accusing you. Not yet. But I'm not going away. Whatever Brielle was trying to uncover, I'll finish it." He stepped back. "You think you're some kind of hero?" She was unstable. She was going to ruin everything. She didn't understand the weight of what she touched. "So you silenced her?" His nostrils flared. "I warned her." I blinked. "Warned her? About what?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving behind a swirl of fallen leaves and the heavy, deafening sound of silence. I didn't follow. Because that silence? It had spoken louder than anything. He was unraveling. I stayed at the cemetery until twilight, watching the sun dip behind the hills, wondering how long Brielle had carried her fear, and how long she had waited for someone to truly listen. When I returned home, I found the sketchbook where I left it. I traced her handwriting again, and this time I noticed something strange. On the back page, faint indentations, like someone had written something and ripped the page out. I held the page to the light and shaded it lightly with pencil. A number appeared. 43971, and beneath it, Eliza, locker, locker, the gym, the post office, the train station. No, Brielle didn't drive. She walked or took the bus. My mind flashed to an old building near the community college, once a youth hostel, now partially abandoned. It used to have coin lockers inside. Brielle had mentioned it once long ago when she talked about places she liked to hide from the world. I had to find it, but not tonight. Tonight I had to protect what I already knew, so I wrapped the USB copy, the sketchbook, and Brielle's original letter in a plastic envelope, sealed it tight, and hid it in the old fireplace beneath the loose brick I hadn't touched since my husband died. And as I lay in bed, the moonlight spilling across the floor like spilled milk, I whispered to the dark, "I'm not afraid of you, Marcus. Because even if I was, I had something stronger than fear. I had Brielle's voice, and she was finally being heard." I was up before the sun, heart thudding with the quiet certainty that today would change something. I dressed in layers, clothes that wouldn't make noise when I moved. No perfumi, hair tied back, purse packed with essentials, gloves, a flashlight, a small notepad, and the folded page from Brielle's sketchbook with the number 43971 and the word locker written in ghost gray pencil. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even Mara. This wasn't about trust. It was about protection. The fewer people who knew, the fewer he could hurt. The old youth hostel sat at the edge of town like a forgotten memory. Once a place for traveling students and drifters, it had fallen into disuse years ago, left behind by tourism and swallowed by overgrown vines and dust. But it hadn't been demolished. The front entrance was padlocked, but the side door, old metal warped from years of weather, opened with a soft creak when I leaned against it. The air inside was thick. Not with mold or decay, but with stillness. The kind of stillness that remembered things. I walked slowly down the narrow corridor past broken vending machines and boarded-up windows. And there in the main hall, faded yellow lockers, most rusted shut. But one. Bar 23971. My breath caught. It looked untouched. Almost too clean. I knelt down and tugged the small handle. It didn't budge. Combination lock. But Brielle wouldn't have left it closed without a way in. I checked the floor beneath it. The dust pattern told me it had been opened recently, no more than a few weeks ago. Then I saw it. A tiny scratch on the lock's metal surface. 3 digits faintly etched, likely with a hairpin or nail. 529. I turned the dial. Click. The door swung open. Inside, a canvas tote bag with red embroidery. Inside the tote, a slim manila folder labeled Trust Deeds, Copy, a disposable phone, a small black notebook, a single flash drive, a pair of black gloves, and a check made out to Marcus L. Mathers. Amount: $250,000. Memo line: Consulting Eliza Romanov Holdings. I stood still, staring at the paper. No more guessing. No more hunches. This was evidence. The flash drive went into my purse. The notebook, too. I took photos of everything else, careful not to disturb the arrangement more than necessary. When I finally stepped out into the light, it was just past 9 a.m. A weak sun had burned through the mist, and the town looked the same. But I didn't. I had walked into the past and come out holding a bomb. Now I needed someone who knew how to disarm it. So I went to Mara. Her face darkened as I showed her the check. That's a shell name. Romanov Holdings. Sounds like a front. Half the companies on these ledgers don't even exist on paper. This, she tapped the folder, is serious, Eleanor. Serious enough to bury a woman? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she opened the notebook. It was Brielle's handwriting again. Entries short, sharp. Met with Eliza again. She didn't seem real, like a mirage. Cold. Calculated. Marcus promised it would just be one deal. Then another, and another. I told him I'd walk away. He said, "You can't." The last page had only 2 words. If found, run. Ah. Mara leaned back, exhaling slowly. We need a third party. Someone independent. Outside local law enforcement. I nodded. You still talk to that journalist? She pulled out her phone. I'll make the call. But Eleanor, I looked at her. There's no going back after this. If Marcus finds out you have this, he'll do more than raise his voice. I know, I said, but I already made peace with that the day she handed me her coat. Mara nodded. Then let's bring the truth into daylight. That night, I sat in my kitchen drinking cold tea and waiting for the journalist Daniel Raines to confirm receipt of the files. He called at 10:42 p.m. I've seen a lot, he said, voice rough from too many late nights and truths the world wasn't ready for. But this is a story buried under silence. And I think your daughter-in-law knew she wouldn't survive it. She didn't, I said. No, he agreed quietly. But maybe her story will. I hung up. For the first time in weeks, I let the tears fall. Not out of fear, out of mourning. For the woman who tried to fight with nothing but sketches and notes. For the mother who didn't see the signs until it was almost too late. For the son I thought I knew. As I stared into the dark, I knew the storm hadn't passed. But at least now, I had lightning in my hands. The next morning arrived gray and heavy. Rain slid down the windows like fingers searching for a way in. I stayed inside pacing. The silence of the house felt thick with history. Every creak of the floorboards under my steps echoing memories I didn't want to visit. I couldn't stop thinking about the last words in Brielle's notebook. If found, run. But I wasn't running. I was staying right here. Because I owed her that. Mara called at noon. Daniel's already spoken to someone at the State Bureau, she said. He's not going public yet. Wants to make sure everything is airtight. But this could move quickly, Eleanor. Good, I said, though. The word tasted strange. Because with every step closer to the truth, the shadows around Marcus grew longer. And I wasn't naive. I knew he wouldn't sit still. Not once he realized the pieces were slipping out of his hands. I kept the flash drive in my pocket all day. Even when I was just reading in the den or folding laundry, I kept touching it through the fabric as if it might vanish if I didn't keep my hand there. By evening, the rain had stopped. I stepped out to water the plants on the porch, a simple ritual, something that made the world feel normal again. That's when I saw it. A slip of paper tucked under the welcome mat. No envelope, no address. Just a single line scrawled in a rushed hand. You don't know what you're doing. Stop before it's too late. No name. But I didn't need one. I looked up the street. No cars. No figures. But the air felt different, tight electric. I stepped inside, locked the door, and turned all the lights off. My heart pounded, not from panic, but from purpose. He knew. And now I knew he knew. But I didn't back down. I made tea, sat in the den, pulled out the black notebook again, flipped through the pages until something caught my eye. A name. D. Harrow. No context. Just the name circled with the word broker, scribbled beside it. I ran a quick search. Nothing local. But then I remembered the real estate transaction Mara had mentioned, the one Marcus witnessed. I logged into the county assessor database and pulled the property records. There it was. Transaction recorded under Romanov Holdings. Buyer listed. Harrow Denton Trust. Harrow. So this D. Harrow wasn't just a person. It was a partner. Possibly a buyer. Or maybe a cover. I picked up the phone and called Mara. Get Daniel to look into Harrow Denton Trust, I said. It's tied to the Romanov account. Might lead to the funding. You think they're laundering real estate now? She asked. I think they've been doing it for years, I said. And I think Marcus is just one of the faces. There was a pause. Then Mara said, You need to be careful. They're watching you. I know, I said. He left me a message. Then it's time we move. Now. That night I stayed at Mara's house. She insisted. Said I shouldn't sleep alone. And I didn't argue. We sat up late, sorting files, building a timeline. The flash drive contained spreadsheets, names, account numbers, addresses, a list of aliases. Most were hard to trace, but two stood out. C.L. Mathers. That was my husband's name. My late husband. Gone now for over a decade. He used your husband's identity, Mara said, lips tight, to open an account in Panama. I stared at the screen. He stole his father's name. Easier to hide behind a dead man. And suddenly pieces began to fit. Marcus had been laundering money under a ghost, his own father. Brielle must have found the records. Maybe she confronted him. Maybe she planned to expose it. And maybe that's why she ended up dead. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to breathe. He said she was unstable, I whispered. He said she imagined things. Mara touched my arm. He knew exactly what she was doing. That's why he silenced her. I looked up. Then let's make sure he never does it again. We printed copies of everything. Multiple sets. One for Daniel. One for the bureau. One for safekeeping in a place only Mara and I knew. Before bed I made one final call to Marcus. He answered after the third ring. His voice flat. Mother. I got your note, I said. A beat of silence. Then you understand. I understand more than you think, I replied. You always assumed I wasn't paying attention. But I remember every story you told as a boy. And I know when a story has changed its ending. You should let this go, he said quietly. It's not your fight. No, I said. But it's your consequence. Click. I set the phone down. The lines had been drawn, and now the final act had begun. The next morning, Mara and I drove to the Bureau of State Investigation offices an hour away. No announcement, no calls in advance. Just us, a sealed envelope, and the weight of a dead woman's truth. We met with a man named Special Agent Darius Leland, calm, measured eyes that had seen too much, but missed nothing. He didn't flinch when we laid out the documents. He didn't raise his voice when we told him about the fake identities, the real estate laundering, or the stolen name of my dead husband. He just nodded and asked one question. Do you feel safe right now? I didn't answer right away. Eventually, I said I feel awake. He leaned forward. Good. Then let's keep it that way. They took our statements, copied the files, logged the USB into evidence. Agent Leland asked if I would be willing to wear a wire if we met with Marcus again. I'm not trying to bait him, I said. I'm trying to finish what she started. Then help us do it right, he said. He gave us a phone, secure, untraceable. Call only me from this line. And Eleanor, one more thing. He slid a photo across the desk. It was grainy. Surveillance quality. A man in a dark coat entering a warehouse. The caption said, D. Harrow, confirmed. He's not just a buyer. He's ex-intelligence, freelancer, deals in offshore shell ops. Disappeared from 3 investigations in 4 years. And now he's doing business with my son, I whispered. Agent Leland nodded. Your daughter-in-law wasn't just uncovering something illegal. She was walking into a shadow operation. And she didn't even know it. By the time we got back to town, my hands were shaking. I didn't tell Marcus we'd gone to the authorities. That would come later, when it mattered. For now, I needed to do one more thing. I needed to go back to Brielle's grave. Not to cry, not to grieve, to make a promise. The wind was sharp that afternoon. Leaves scattered like secrets at my feet. I knelt by her stone, ran my fingers over her name. You weren't crazy, I said softly. You weren't paranoid. You were brave. And I didn't protect you when I should have. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small charm from her necklace, one I'd found hidden in her sketchbook binding. It was shaped like a key, and on the back engraved in almost invisible lettering, E.M. For when you're ready. She had left it for me, not just the note, not just the drawings, but a message across time. When I got home, I knew what it opened. The small wooden keepsake box in the hallway. It had belonged to my husband. I hadn't opened it in years. The key fit perfectly. Inside, documents, original trust paperwork, a letter from my husband dated 1998. If you're reading this, Ellie, it means I didn't get to tell you. I set aside money, quietly, legally, to protect us in case things ever got complicated with Marcus. He's smart, but he listens to the wrong people, and I worry what he'll become when I'm gone. I sank into the floor. The man I had loved, the boy I had raised, and the woman who had trusted me, all woven together in a tragedy I hadn't seen coming. But now I did. The money my husband had hidden, still there, untouched. And it gave me options, real ones. Power I hadn't realized I still had. That night, I met Marcus at the cafe on Elm Street. He arrived late, dressed in a dark coat, the same one from the surveillance photo. My stomach turned. He didn't smile. He didn't greet me. He sat and said, "You're making mistakes." "No," I said. "I'm correcting them. You've been talking to people, and you've been lying to them. I warned you, Mother." And I remembered, I said, sliding a paper across the table. But this time, I'm the one delivering the message. He looked down. It was a copy of the check made out to him by Romanov Holdings. His hand twitched. "Where did you get this?" "I didn't get it," I said. "Brielle gave it to me, along with your fake accounts, your secret partnerships, and your very real crimes." He leaned forward. "You think this ends with you walking away clean?" "No," I said calmly. "I think it ends with you walking away. Quietly. Or not at all." His eyes flickered. I lowered my voice. "Because there are 3 copies. And I'm not afraid of you anymore." He stood up. People turned. I met his gaze and didn't flinch. Then he walked out. No words. Just silence. But in that silence I heard it clearly. The sound of a man who realized the ground beneath him was cracking. And it was a sound I would remember for the rest of my life. The next 2 days passed like a gathering storm. Quiet but tense. I kept the curtains drawn, the doors locked, and the secure phone by my side. Marcus didn't call. He didn't visit. But the silence wasn't comfort. It was warning. Mara called just after dawn on the 3rd day. Her voice was clipped urgent. "Daniel says they're moving in." "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting up in bed. "The Bureau. They've built their case. Enough for a full investigation, possibly an arrest. They're executing a search warrant today. His office, his accounts, everything." I held the phone tighter. "Does he know?" "Not yet. But he will soon." I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I felt anticipation, like standing at the top of a hill and knowing that any moment the avalanche would start. I got dressed. Carefully, neatly. The way Brielle used to. She always said presentation mattered. Even if you're walking into a storm, at least wear a clean coat. At 10:32 a.m. I watched from Mara's house across the street as 2 black sedans pulled up outside Marcus's building. Agents in suits stepped out, clipped badges on their belts, and approached the door. Moments later they entered. It was happening. The unraveling. I didn't rejoice. I didn't cry. I just stood at the window, arms folded, heart steady. Then my secure phone buzzed. A message from Agent Leland. He's cooperating. For now. We'll call to debrief soon. I read it 3 times. Cooperating? Not confessing. Not arrested. That meant he was talking. Negotiating. Possibly bargaining with the truth to save himself. The thought made my skin crawl. He wasn't going to go down easily. Marcus had been born knowing how to navigate storms. He thrived in them. But now I was ready. I spent the next few hours reviewing every file we'd collected, rereading Brielle's notes, re-listening to the audio retracing every step. I wasn't going to let him rewrite the narrative, because if I had learned anything from Brielle, it was this. The person who tells the story first often controls how it's remembered. That evening, Agent Leland called. Can you talk? Yes. We've recovered multiple devices, some encrypted. Your son admitted to participating in what he described as a consulting network. Says he didn't know the full scope. Do you believe him? There was a pause. He's too intelligent not to know. Will he be arrested? Eventually. Right now we're watching, listening, building. We need him to lead us to the others. He's bait. And what happens when the others know he's talking? They'll come for him. Or try. I said nothing. Mrs. Mathers, Agent Leland added, we need you to remain cautious. You're a loose thread in this. If they see you pulling on it, they'll cut it, I finished. Yes, let them try. After we hung up, I stared at the fire burning low in Mara's hearth. There was one thing left I hadn't done. One name I hadn't spoken aloud since all this began. Eliza, the shadow behind the curtain. The woman in Brielle's sketches. The name on the check. I opened the notebook again. There were only 2 references to her. Eliza wore red gloves. Never spoke directly. Only through Marcus. She threatened me once. Said artists should stick to pretty things. That was it. I didn't know if Eliza was real or just a name, but something told me. If this wasn't over yet, she would be the one standing at the edge. I returned home that night, alone, against Mara's protests. I needed to walk through my house again. Not as a victim, not as a frightened mother, but as a woman who had survived a war she hadn't chosen. I lit a candle on the kitchen table, opened the last envelope Brielle had left. It wasn't a note this time. It was a photo of her and me, taken during one of our rare afternoons together, tea on the porch, books in hand. Behind it, a single line written in her delicate scrawl. Thank you for listening, even when I couldn't speak. And for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not for what we had lost, but for what she had left behind, her courage, her brilliance, her quiet call to justice. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about every woman who had been silenced. Every truth buried beneath wealth, charm, and intimidation, and I would be the one to dig them up, even if it took the rest of my life. The next few weeks unfolded like a chess game no one could walk away from. The Bureau kept pressing. Marcus kept maneuvering. Every move he made, every word he offered them was calculated, controlled. He wasn't fighting the truth anymore. He was trying to shape it, tilt it, mask it just enough to walk away scarred but free. I knew the look. I had seen it once when he was 10, caught lying about a stolen comic book from the store. He cried, then told me he didn't mean to, that the voices in his head made him do it. I had believed him. He was just a boy. Now he was a man with 6 bank accounts under other people's names, a dead wife whose voice he had tried to erase, and enough plausible deniability to choke the system. But I wasn't a mother blinded by love anymore. I was his witness, and I was ready to speak. Agent Leland called again. We have a court date set. He's testifying in exchange for reduced sentencing. He'll lose everything except his freedom. But it's going to get messy. People will talk. I'm ready, I said. I'll testify if it comes to that. He paused. There's something else. I braced myself. We traced the origin of the Romanov Holdings paperwork. There's a woman, real, mid-40s, operates under multiple passports. Eastern European, she goes by Eliza Marenko now. She disappeared 2 days after our raid. Disappeared how? Abandoned apartment. No signs of violence. But she's gone. And you think she'll come after Marcus? We think she already has. A chill ran down my spine. The phone buzzed again moments after I hung up. This time it was from an unknown number. A single message. He took what was mine. I only take what's owed. Eliza. She wasn't a ghost. She was watching, waiting. And now she knew I had seen her name too. I stared at the message, then deleted it. That night, I changed my locks. Again. I moved the originals, Brielle's letters, the notebook, even the sketchbook into a bank safety deposit box. Not for me. For whoever might need them one day. Whoever might look for the truth when the dust settled and the news cycle moved on. And then I did something unexpected. I called Marcus. He answered in one ring. Mother, let's meet, I said. One last time. Silence. Then, where? The house. Tomorrow. Noon. He didn't ask why. Because he already knew. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't pace. I just sat in Brielle's art studio surrounded by her unfinished canvases and the scent of turpentine. I whispered to the walls. I'll finish what you couldn't. He arrived at 11:57 a.m., as always early controlled. He stood in the doorway like a man walking into his own funeral. The kitchen was set like it used to be when he was a boy. Lemon tea, warm bread, silence. He sat. I did not. You've been busy, I said. His eyes were tired. Less fire, more smoke. I'm cooperating. They said, I'm not here to talk about what they said. I cut him off. I'm here to ask one question. Just one. He waited. Did you love her? He flinched. Even after everything I said softly, even after the money, the lies, the threats. Did you ever love her, Marcus? He didn't answer right away. And when he finally did, it wasn't the voice of the boy I raised. It was the voice of a man who had run out of excuses. I tried, he said. But she asked questions I didn't want answered. She looked at me like she saw through me. I couldn't stand that. I needed loyalty. She gave you loyalty, I whispered. And you crushed her for it. He looked away. I'm not going to protect you anymore, I said. If they ask me to testify, I will. If they need the files, they'll have them. I won't bury the truth, Marcus. I know. And for a brief moment, he looked like he had when he was 10. Again, scared, uncertain, too late. Then he stood. This is the last time you'll see me, he said. I know, I replied. He left without saying goodbye, and I sat alone at the kitchen table. I didn't cry. Not anymore. Because grief had done its work. Now came clarity. Now came peace. And the quiet understanding that sometimes the people we raise become strangers, but the women they try to destroy, if they're lucky, leave behind mothers who refuse to forget. 2 weeks passed. Marcus vanished. Not into prison. No, not yet. He was cooperating, which in their language meant monitored, advised, and handled. I suspected they had him under watch somewhere out of state, maybe holed up in a safe house trading breadcrumbs for immunity. But I no longer followed the bureau updates closely. I didn't need to. The storm had already swept through my home, and I had survived it. I spent my mornings in Brielle's studio, cleaning, sorting, restoring. I couldn't bear to paint, not yet, but I started cataloging her work, labeling canvases, photographing pages from her sketchbooks, typing out lines from her notes into a file on my desktop. Her words, scattered and frantic in her final days, began to form something clearer now. A woman with one foot in truth and the other in fear. A woman who saw what no one else wanted to see. A woman who whispered her warnings in the margins in pencil, in metaphor, trusting somehow that I would come looking. She hadn't left a trail of evidence. She had left a eulogy, but not for herself, for me. For the version of myself I had silenced all these years. The one who knew. The one who listened but didn't speak. The one who folded her instincts into politeness and smiled through her son's lies. Not anymore. Now when I passed a mirror, I looked longer. Not because I feared what I would see, but because I finally recognized her. The woman who came through the fire not with vengeance, but with voice. One evening, I visited the gallery where Brielle had once submitted a few of her paintings under a pseudonym. Back then, she hadn't wanted Marcus to know. He thinks art is just an escape, she had told me once. But for me, it's the map out. The gallery owner, a woman named Elise, greeted me warmly. I always hoped she'd come back, she said. Her work had something honesty, but it felt unfinished. I smiled softly. That's because it was, but maybe it doesn't have to stay that way. I brought in 2 pieces the next day, Not the most refined, but the most revealing. One showed a woman sitting at a desk covered in paper eyes, wild with thought. Another, unfinished, was a portrait of a faceless man in a collapsing house. She said this one haunted her. I told Elise. Now I know why. Elise agreed to feature a small corner in the back, just 2 paintings and a placard that read, "In memory of Brielle Mathers." A voice that spoke in silence. A truth still unfolding. It wasn't justice, but it was a start. Mara dropped by that weekend with scones and questions. "Any more messages from Eliza?" she asked, half joking. I shook my head. Not a word. It's like she never existed. Maybe she didn't, Mara said, sipping tea. Maybe Eliza is a myth they invented to scare people. Or maybe she's a woman like us, older and visible when she wants to be. More dangerous than they expected. She left a message, I said. "One final line." Mara looked up. I quoted it. "He took what was mine. I only take what's owed." And what do you think she meant? I think she meant Marcus tried to outplay the wrong woman. Mara grinned. Then she and Brielle had something in common. We toasted to that. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where so much of this began, and opened my journal. Not Brielle's. Mine. A fresh one. The first page had only 1 sentence. "This is what happens when silence finds its voice." I wrote until the candle burned low. Wrote about the coat, the note, the voice recorder, the sketchbooks, the safe, the betrayal, the fear, the way Marcus looked when he realized I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I wrote it not for the courts or for history. I wrote it for the woman I once was, the one who had accepted too many half-truths, who had overlooked bruises covered in sleeves, who had mistaken compliance for peace. Never again. Now I kept a new kind of record. Not in sketches or hushed conversations, but in words that carried weight. And still late at night I talked to her. Not always aloud, sometimes only in thought. Brielle. I imagine her in the garden, her hands stained with charcoal, her brow furrowed as she shaded shadows that only she could see. I imagine her saying, "I knew you'd find it. I just didn't know how long it would take." And I answer quietly, like a prayer. I'm here now. Spring arrived early that year. It came not with blooms, but with a stillness and exhale the town didn't know it had been holding. News of the investigation broke slowly. The headlines weren't explosive, just whispers on the edge of the newspaper tucked between council meeting recaps and grocery store ads. Local consultant under federal scrutiny in multi-state financial probe. Anonymous evidence leads to real estate laundering sting. Marcus's name appeared only once, buried in a sentence about an unnamed financial advisor believed to have facilitated document transactions. They were shielding him. For now, but I knew better. And I knew it wouldn't last. Behind closed doors, the Bureau's net was tightening. Eliza's aliases were being flagged in banking networks from Prague to Panama. Shell companies were unraveling like bad knitting. And somewhere in that storm of data and hidden files sat my son. Quiet, slipping from the spotlight but never from consequence. Mara and I met Daniel Raines, the journalist, at a diner just off the highway. He brought a briefcase full of printouts, highlighted names and maps with thread-like lines drawn between jurisdictions. "It's deeper than we thought," he said. "Brielle didn't just stumble into a laundering scheme. She walked into a network that's been operating for over a decade." "And Marcus?" I asked. He was a runner, a name on a contract, a translator sometimes, but his fingerprints are everywhere. "Will he serve time?" "Unlikely," Daniel said, sipping his bitter coffee. "Unless they want to make an example of him." "I do," I said. Daniel looked at me hard, then soft. "You're the only one who's told this story straight." "I didn't tell it," I said. "She did. I just listened." That night, I revisited the place where it all began. Not the house, not the gallery, not even the grave. The library. It had been months since I'd stepped inside. Dust still coated the shelves like a quiet shroud. The ghost book was still in its place, untitled, unnoticed, heavy with invisible history. I pulled it down, flipped through the pages where Brielle had hidden her first clues. And there, tucked in the spine, I found one last thing. A bookmark, handwritten, pressed between thick cardstock, brittle with age. One line. "Stories survive when the right person hears them." She had left that for me. I had no doubt. The next morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a photo Brielle's last self-portrait. The one she had torn from her sketchbook saying it was too raw. It was her in chiaroscuro. Face half lit, half shadowed. But her eyes were wide open. Not afraid. Not broken. But fierce. On the back in small, unfamiliar handwriting. Tell them. Tell all of them. Eliza. Whether she sent it to protect me or to warn me, I wasn't sure. Maybe both. But her message was clear. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about truth. And truth deserved light. Mara and I held a private memorial for Brielle 2 weeks later. Not at the cemetery. No, not there. We chose the bluff overlooking the old river path where she used to sketch in the summers. It was quiet. Wildflowers bent in the breeze. The sun was soft and forgiving. We lit a single candle, read a passage from her notebook, and left a sealed envelope in the roots of the elm tree. Inside were 2 things. A copy of the USB drive, a handwritten letter from me to her. You were right. You saw what none of us wanted to, and still you didn't run. I'm so sorry for my silence. But I will not be silent anymore. Then we walked away, not to forget her, but to carry her. In every question we ask, in every injustice we refuse to excuse, in every quiet woman who looks too closely and listens too long. Women like her are not weak. They are warnings. And in the stillness that followed, I began something new. A foundation. The Brielle Trust. Small at first, just a single webpage. A quiet fund. But it will grow. A place where women can report financial abuse. Where overlooked voices can be archived, investigated, believed. Where stories like hers can live on not as tragedy, but as testimony. Because in the end, that's what Brielle left behind. Not just evidence, not just mystery, but a legacy of looking deeper, of never accepting what the world says must be true, of telling the story even when your voice shakes. Especially when your voice shakes. Because sometimes survival isn't loud, it's patient. And sometimes revenge doesn't explode, it blossoms. I didn't expect the letter, not after all this time. It came in a plain envelope. No stamp, no postmark, just slipped through my mail slot on a Thursday morning when the air still carried the scent of thawing earth and early daffodils. Inside a single sheet of paper typed, no signature. She didn't fall. You were right. He didn't kill her with his hands. But he killed her just the same. Let the silence break. No name. No return address. But the implication was unmistakable. Someone had been watching. And they wanted me to finish what I started. Later that day, Mara came by with a copy of the Regional Legal Bulletin. They've reopened Brielle's death certificate inquiry, she said, setting the paper down with quiet gravity. What prompted it? I asked, not daring to hope. She raised an eyebrow. A bundle of documents, anonymous drop-off, files, logs, medical records, an audio file too, though it's heavily redacted. Who? No name, no trace. But we both knew. Eliza, she was still out there. Not seeking justice exactly, but making sure her version of it played out on time. The bureau called me the next day. Mrs. Mather's agent Leland's voice crackled through the line. There's new interest from the DA. They're considering pressing charges, not just on the financial side. There's a chance your son might face a full deposition on Brielle's death. I closed my eyes. Will he go to prison? I asked. A long pause. If the evidence sticks, he replied. But it won't be easy. I'm not asking for easy, I said. I'm asking for honest. And then I did something I had never done before. I asked to speak publicly, not in a courtroom, not in a police office, in the one place Brielle had once feared and cherished in equal measure, the town hall. 2 weeks later, I stood before a room of strangers, some familiar faces from church, others from the market, the gallery, the sidewalks I used to walk with Marcus in a stroller beside me. And I told them everything. Not just the details, names, dates, crimes, but the ache, the silence, the betrayal. I told them about the sketchbooks and the night she left the note in my coat. I told them about the way Marcus smiled through lies and how easy it is to mistake charm for character. I told them about the key, the locker, The woman who vanished but left fire in her wake. And I ended with this. There are women like Brielle everywhere. They don't always cry for help. They paint it, sketch it, scribble it into notebooks and trust someone will care enough to find it. I didn't care soon enough, but I do now, and I won't let her story disappear. There was no applause, only silence. The good kind. The kind that means something is settling inside people's bones. Afterward, a girl no older than 20 approached me. I didn't know her, she said, but I think about her all the time. My stepfather was like that, always in the shadows smiling. I placed a hand gently over hers. You believe yourself? I asked. She nodded. Then start there, I said. And she smiled like someone who had just been handed a compass after wandering too long in the dark. I returned home and found a small package on my porch. Inside, a USB drive, labeled in careful handwriting. Her voice. It was a digital archive. A series of recordings Brielle had made in the weeks before her death. Poems, journal entries, sketches she narrated aloud. And then one final file, simply titled, To Eleanor. I played it. Her voice filled the room, shaky at first, but steady with truth. I didn't want to die, but I knew that if I vanished, someone had to know what happened. You're the only one who ever looked long enough. And even if this story ends badly, maybe it'll matter. Maybe someone like me will hear it and run before it's too late. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to remember me. I pressed pause. I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered, I remember everything. And I kept listening, because that's what love does after silence. It listens until the voice becomes real again. I watched the town shift in slow, careful increments. At first, there was resistance. Whispers in the pews, side eyes at the market. People who once called Marcus a good boy or a smart one now fumbled with their words. They didn't know how to reconcile the man they remembered with the truths I had laid bare. I didn't blame them. No one wants to believe the monster lived next door, let alone came from your own family tree. But time did what it always does. It wore down defenses, unraveled doubt, and soon those whispers turned into conversations, murmurs into meetings. Brielle's story, once hidden in shadows and sketchbooks, now echoed through classrooms, church bulletins, and coffee shops. A local teacher asked to use parts of her journal in a unit on truth in silence. A college student reached out from 2 towns over to say she had felt less alone because of the gallery tribute. The Brielle Trust received its first grant, small but meaningful, enough to fund counseling sessions for women dealing with financial coercion and emotional erasure. Change doesn't always come in roars. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet knock on the door. And then one morning, I received a call I didn't expect. Agent Leland again, his voice steady but grave. Eliza's body was found in a dockyard warehouse. Baltimore. Single shot to the chest. No witnesses. No prints. I sat down slowly. And Marcus, still cooperating, still claiming he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But we found a wire transfer between his offshore account and a firm suspected of contracting, let's call it, enforcement work. Nothing definitive. Yet, will he be charged? Too early to tell. But it's not looking good for him. I thanked him, hung up, and sat still for a long while staring at the sunlight crawling across the floor. Eliza was gone. Just like that. The phantom in the margins. The specter behind Brielle's fear. The last thread of shadow in this tangled web. Dead. I didn't mourn her. Not in the traditional sense. But I lit a candle that night. For every woman who tried to fight monsters on their own terms. And for the ones who didn't make it to the other side. The next day, I received an email from Daniel Rains. Subject line, Final article draft, for your approval. It was a long piece, investigative, raw, precise, a careful stitching together of everything we'd uncovered from Brielle's voice notes to financial forensics to Eliza's global footprint. But it wasn't the facts that hit me the hardest. It was the last paragraph. And at the center of it all, a woman who didn't scream. She listened. She watched. She walked through the wreckage and turned it into a trail for others to follow. Eleanor Mathers never sought justice for herself. She sought it for the woman her son tried to erase. And in doing so, she reminded us, silence isn't absence. It's preparation. I stared at those words until they blurred. And then I hit approve. A week later, the article published. It spread, not virally, not explosively, but steadily, with reverence, with reach. Emails poured in, from mothers, from daughters, from strangers who said, "I wish someone had believed me the way you believed her." I answered every message, not because I felt obligated, but because I understood. When you've lived through the burning, the least you can do is hand someone else a map through the fire. On the anniversary of Brielle's death, I visited her grave alone. No fanfare, no speech, just a folded letter and a single lily. I placed them at the base of her headstone and sat down in the grass. "I did what I could," I whispered. "It wasn't perfect, but it was real." The wind rustled the leaves overhead. I imagined her smile, not the polite one, not the one she wore when Marcus was watching, but the one she reserved for sunlight and music and quiet triumphs. And I whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." I stayed until dusk, and when I left, I didn't look back, because she wasn't there anymore. She was in the brush strokes, in the words, in the trust that now bore her name, and most of all, she was in me. The day Marcus was formally indicted, it rained. Not a downpour, not a storm. Just a steady, relentless drizzle that turned everything gray, the sidewalks, the courthouse steps, even the headlines that appeared by noon. Local consultant linked to international fraud network faces trial. New evidence in suspicious death of financial whistleblower. They didn't say her name. Not yet. Brielle was still a footnote in their story, the deceased spouse, the artist who may have known too much. But that was changing. Inside the courtroom, I sat near the back. Invisible, but present. I watched him walk in. My son, shackled at the ankles, eyes dull with fatigue, jaw tight with controlled fury. He didn't look at me. I didn't expect him to. And when the charges were read, wire fraud, identity theft, obstruction of justice, he stood still. Not proud, not ashamed, just still. The judge asked if he understood. He nodded. And in that moment, I felt both nothing and everything. The child I once held in my arms was gone. What stood there now was a stranger I no longer had to protect. That night, I returned home to find a small package waiting for me. No note, no return address. Just a tiny parcel wrapped in brown paper and string. Inside, a silver locket. I recognized it immediately. It had belonged to Brielle's mother, passed down through generations, always worn under her blouse. I'd asked Brielle about it once. She said it holds nothing but breath. But sometimes that's enough to carry forward. I opened it. Inside, a piece of folded paper. Delicate, thin, one line. "You were always the breath." I held it in my hands, stunned. Some part of her had prepared for this end, for this beginning. And maybe, just maybe, Eliza hadn't sent it. Maybe Brielle had arranged for it to find me in the event that truth finally bloomed. A week later, I donated her final sketchbook to the gallery. The page I chose to display was simple. A portrait of two hands, fingertips barely touching, one ink-stained, the other wrapped in shadow. The title she'd written in the margin, "Almost Heard." They hung it near the entrance where everyone would see. And beside it, a plaque. Brielle Mathers, 1991, 2023. Artist, listener, truth keeper. She painted what the world wouldn't say. Now I sit in her studio, my studio, not to mourn but to write. Because there are other voices now, quiet ones reaching out to me. Letters from women in countries I've never seen. Drawings from girls who are only beginning to question the stories they're told. Messages from people who are gaslit, silenced, erased. They don't ask for rescue. They ask to be remembered. So I do. I write. I answer. I send books, donations, letters of encouragement. I remind them what Brielle taught me. That silence isn't weakness. It's witness. Tomorrow I'll speak again. This time at a conference on financial abuse and inheritance manipulation. They've asked me to tell my story, but it's not mine anymore. It belongs to every woman who's ever walked through a house filled with secrets and chosen not to set it on fire, but to document it instead, so it can never be denied again. When the night settles, I return to the place where I first read her note. The old coat, still hanging on the back of the chair, the worn paper folded with trembling hands. He knows I know. If anything happens, ask Eleanor. She had trusted me, even when she shouldn't have, even when I hadn't earned it yet. But I have now, and as I extinguish the light, I whisper, I heard you, Brielle, and now they will too. We often believe the greatest tragedies are loud sirens, screams shattering glass. But some of the most devastating betrayals slip in quietly. Through a door left unlocked, a note left behind, a woman ignored even in her final breath. Brielle Mathers didn't die in a blaze of glory. She disappeared in a whisper, but in that whisper was a warning and a call. She wasn't the first woman to be dismissed, gaslit, or reduced to a side story in a man's narrative. But she left behind something rare, a roadmap, a trail of crumbs buried in sketchbooks, in receipts, in silence. A trail she trusted someone would one day follow. I was late. I didn't protect her when I should have, but I listened when it mattered most. And that changed everything. Because justice isn't always the slamming of a gavel. Sometimes it's a mother testifying, a painting hung on a gallery wall, a girl who reads a story online and whispers, "That sounds like me." Marcus will face whatever justice decides, but Brielle, she has already won, not because she escaped, but because she taught us how to stay, how to bear witness, how to hold space for women whose truths were buried long before their names were ever spoken. So if you're still listening, thank you. If you've ever doubted your voice, don't. And if someone has tried to erase, this, there is always someone listening. Maybe not loudly, maybe not yet. But when silence finds its voice, it's unforgettable. Grace is truth. Subscribe for more stories where women rise from the margins and truth takes the final word.